Good evening, everybody. Hi, my name is Arlene Bailey, and I'm the co-president of Temple Beth David, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all to our temple here in Temple City, and we're going to have a very special evening. I would like now to thank and introduce our Temple Beth David Book Committee, who has cooked and baked everything is homemade. Yes. And the good news is you can eat everything because I didn't make anything. I did make the skewers, so that's okay. All right. We have prepared, and like I said, we prepared a delicious buffet full of Italian-themed appetizers and pastries. Yes, there is biscotti, but other things that you may not know. Okay, so in honor of tonight's book. So, and I want to thank, and I really want to thank our committee, starting with Robin Evans, Susan Ivory, Carol Ozer, Helene Emmerich, these are all our bakers, Lori Everett, our office manager, Arsene Alikin, who could not be here, and Mike Zeroder, our tech whiz. So I'm really excited for you all to be here, and I look forward to this book. And now I'm going to pass it over to Denise Schaefer, who is the co-chair of the Federation Book.
Actually, I'm the co-chair of this event. We'll let Rebecca, where's Rebecca? It's not on? Hold it, like, okay. Well, welcome. This is our 27th annual Jewish Book Festival. And so welcome, we're so happy you're here supporting Jewish authors and Jewish books, which is why we're all here. So it's a tremendous amount of effort and commitment to create this festival. So before we start and introduce our author, I'd like to acknowledge a few people for all the hard work to put this festival together. Thank you, Arlene, for introducing Temple Beth David. It's always a pleasure to work with you guys. You do an amazing job. Our committee members, raise your hand. They have blue lanyards. Thank you. We have a great committee of about 10 women who go through 300 books and narrow it down to a program that we think that you'll all appreciate. It's quite a diverse program this year, and we've really been enjoying it. So our committee, any advanced readers here? Raise your hand. So we do have community members who read some of these books that sort of try and pick out the ones that are interesting. Our Federation staff and our coordinator, Rebecca. Where's Rebecca? There you are. Rebecca is the one that works with our Jewish Book Council, where we get most of our books in New York, and represents us and our choices to bring us our program. And our literary circle members, whose financial support makes this entire festival possible and enables us to offer this festival at no cost to our community. And okay, so this evening's program is going to be first a presentation by our author, followed by some questions and answered. So let me start by introducing our author, Mary Morris. Mary's the author of numerous works of fiction, A Gateway to the Moon and The Jazz Palace, to name a few, which, as we talked to you, actually were here in years past, apparently. So Linda remembers, so Mary's been here before. And some nonfiction books, including the travel classic, Nothing to Declare, Memoirs of a Woman Traveling Alone. Mary's quite the traveler, so you might see that come up in her presentation. And I looked at her website as I was preparing this, and I counted 16 books that Mary has written since 1978. So quite a prolific author. Yes. Her latest book that she's going to present tonight is called The Red House. And as you might have sensed, it takes place in a little-known part of Italy, hence our Italian theme. It was a People Magazine Book of the Week this past May during her debut publication, and was included in Oprah Daily's Summer 2025 must-read list. Reviews have said this book is a wonderful mix of history and mystery of time, place, and character. Mary's the recipient of the Rome Prize for Literature and the 2016 Anisfeld Wolf Book Award for Fiction. Her many novels and story collections have been translated into multiple languages. She comes to us from Brooklyn, New York. So thank you for joining us, and we look forward to your presentation.
Yeah, I think I have my own little microphone. Thank you for that. I'm gonna put this away. Just let me do a little very minor housekeeping. I need some water. I'm gonna put this on the floor. Mike, okay, is this turned off, I think? Okay, sorry, let me just grab some water. I have a non-contagious cough. Don't be afraid of it. No one will get it. My husband has not. Can you hear me okay? Okay, good. So first of all, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I was just talking with Linda, and she reminded me that I've actually been in this community a number of times. Linda, right? A number of times, and I want to thank you for having me back. I'm very interested in buried histories, so I seem to continue to write these historic novels, even though I have tried to resist them after a certain point. They are a lot of work and a lot of research. So I'm going to talk to you a little about the origin of the Red House and why I wrote it. I have some slides that I'll share with you, and then I'll talk to you a little bit about the book, and I will try to talk about Italy during the Holocaust, although I'm not a historian, I'm a storyteller, so I try to stick to the facts, but you know. So I like to say that as a writer, there are stories you choose, but then there are the stories that choose you. And the Red House was a story that chose me. I wasn't looking for a story. I actually, well, I'll give you the context for it, but I was in the middle of some other project at the time. So I tend to ramble, but I actually sort of know where I'm going, so just bear with me. I'm a storyteller, so I like to tell stories. So for about 20 years, my husband and I did house swaps. So we swapped our house with strangers' houses. And basically it was okay. No one ever stole the silver, not that we really had much silver, but you know, it was basically fine. We met some wonderful people along the way. But after 20 years, our daughter had grown up. She graduated from college. She was probably about to get married. And I said, this is not how I want to travel anymore. I'm ready not to swap my house. So he said, okay, good. I support that decision. Great. And so the next day, I get this email, because we belong to a website, and it was for a farmhouse in southern Italy. Yeah. That's what my husband said, my long suffering. So it was this so it's what's called a masseria. So a masseria is a fortified farmhouse. These are farmhouses that have walls around them. Think of yourself as having your own Greek city, like it's a little city to yourself. And the reason they were walled was because they would have wars with the other farmhouses. So anyway, that was before my visit. But anyway, this family said it's our family, I don't know what you call it in English, but it's a family origin home, and they didn't live there, but they would like to welcome us to this place, and they would like to come to New York. So I went to poor Larry, and I said, honey, you know, and he goes, okay, I guess we're going to Italy. And I said, we are. And he said, all right, you know, get the house ready. So anyway, we went there, and it was as wonderful as I envisioned it, even better. It was and is. I will just tell you, we have gone back 13 times now. And we are members of the family, as far as I'm concerned. As far as they're concerned, we were at their grandson's wedding. We're the only non-Italians. So we really bonded with this family. But after we'd been there now I said I was working on another project, and I probably will talk about that other project because it's kind of funny. I like to share that. But anyway, it was Gateway to the Moon. Some of you have read that. So we've been there a little while, and the daughter who lived in the area, she was a lawyer, and she said, oh, there's a wonderful town nearby, and I want to take you there and visit. It's called Altobello Bello. Well, I have this side career as a travel writer, and I knew about Altobello Bello, and I knew I didn't want to go there. I knew I didn't want to go there because I knew it would be very touristy. It was on the tourist maps, and we avoid those. I've been to Paris every year, and I've never gone to the Eiffel Tower, so I avoid those kinds of places, okay? But anyway, she wanted to go, and I wanted to be a good guest, and so we went. And as I anticipated, it was, Altobello Bello looks like a town designed by hobbits. Okay, if you were to live in Middle-earth, it is conical-shaped houses, and no one knows why these houses exist. They only exist in that part of Italy in the whole world. And they are really quite extraordinary, unless there are tourists who discovered it. And so, anyway, we got there, and there were nothing but tour buses and T-shirts and things. I couldn't handle it. So I said I was tired after a little while, and there was a courtyard, and I said I would go sit in this courtyard and rest, and I bought a gelato, and I sound okay? I'm getting a little echo. Okay. So I went and I sat in this courtyard and eating my gelato, and across from me, not very far, really, not even all the way to the door, was this sort of verstunkene little tree. And I don't have to translate that, do I? Okay. Just a scrawny little tree, and it had a plaque around it, and the plaque was almost as big as the tree. And I was like, well, what is that plaque, and what is that about? Well, I'm going to turn on this. I'm going to try. I'm going to do the best I can, Mike. This is the plaque. In this town, this touristy place. And the plaque said, yes, right, my feeling exactly. I went up and I looked at it, and I thought, okay, I can sort of make out some of the Hebrew. I can definitely read the Italian. And it says, to this olive tree from the hills of Jerusalem, to the community of Altobello Bello, for the hospitality you offered our citizens during the Nazi persecution. Okay, so, I just was stunned by this plaque in this town. It wasn't anything I anticipated. And when my friend came back, she's very well connected. She's a very interesting, intelligent person. I said to her, Cinzia, what is this plaque? And she said, I have no idea. I've never noticed it before. Let's go talk to the tourist bureau because they would surely know. So we went to the tourist bureau. I speak very good Italian, so I didn't really I understood immediately what was being said. And they said they didn't know about the plaque and they knew nothing of the tree. And I was like, wow, this is in your courtyard, in a churchyard, in your courtyard. And so but because I was working on this other project, so as a writer, this became a curiosity to me, not a subject. It was interesting. I thought, well, maybe one day I'll know what this is about, but I just filed it away in the back of my head. So COVID happened. We didn't go to Italy for a couple years. I forget the exact timeline here, but when we were going back, I was, of course, late for the airport. I had to walk my dog. I'm trying to walk the dog. My neighbor's walking his dog. The two dogs don't like each other. So I'm trying to get somewhere, and my neighbor said, what are you doing there? You seem like you're in a hurry. And I said, yes, we're late for the airport. We have to get on a flight to go to Italy. And he goes, che bene, non sapete, blah, 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 blah. And he starts talking to me in fluent Italian. So I've known him for 30 years. I said, Bob, I didn't know that you're Italian. And he said, oh, my family are Roman Jews. And they fled during the Holocaust. And they lived there during the Holocaust, and then they survived, and then we migrated. And I'd finished that other project, and I was and I remembered the plaque. It had been a few years, and I said, Bob, do you know anything about the plaque in the town of Alba-Lobello? Because he had just taken a class in Jewish history. He said, well, I don't know anything about that, but I have a bunch of articles, and I can send you some things you can read them, while you're away. So he sent me a bunch of stuff. We get on the plane. My husband is such an annoying thing. He just goes to sleep on a plane, and he wakes up when you land. You know what I mean? One of those people. Me, I'm awake all night. I'm awake, and I'm reading these articles. I've downloaded them into my laptop. I'm reading the articles, and I get to a footnote in an article, and it said that in the town of Alba-Lobello, on the outskirts, was a detention center called La Casa Rosa, the Red House. So I wake Larry up. I said, listen, you have to see this. He's fine. I wake him up. I said, look, I found it. I found what the plaque is about, but I need to go there. I need to find this place. And so we get back to, the southern Italy, Puglia. It's way south. We have a car. We drive to Alba-Lobello. I start asking around the same thing, the tourist people, and nobody knows. Nobody's heard of anything. They don't know what this means. They don't know the Casa Rosa. And we're driving around. I said, let's drive. It's got to be somewhere. So we drove and we drove and we drove, and then we came to this building. So I told Larry to drive in the driveway. It's a long driveway. And we drove in, and this is the Red House. That is the physical building of the Red House. And I walked around it, I looked at it, and I felt something I can't even describe right now. It was heavy in my heart. And I did not want to write another historical novel, but I just felt that, I needed to know more about this building. So this graffiti was written on the side of the building. It says, "No sarò qui per sempre." I will not be here forever. I will explain to you later what this graffiti really is, because it's actually part of the story. It's quite interesting. Anyway, so we walked around. I don't want to get to the inside of the building. The next slide might be from the inside. And that's another slide of the graffiti. That is the inside. So I called Cinzia. I said, Cinzia, I found the Red House. And I'm just going to go back to that visual. I said, I found it, and now I need to go inside. And she said, I don't know. And I don't know how. It's padlocked. There's no way in. And she calls me the next day, and she said, I found the only guy in all of Italy who has the keys to this building. And I said, okay. And she said, he'll meet you there tomorrow at 10 in the morning. And, bring your notebook. And I said, okay, I'm there. So we were there, and we met Carlo, and he had the key. Now, he told me that this building, which was in fact a detention center, and you might say concentration camp, not really a concentration camp like we think of concentration camps in the North, but it was a place that you could not leave, that this building was about to be turned into a discotheque. But someone in the historic part of the Historic Preservation Department of Italy, when they were getting the papers for this discotheque, said, I don't think you're going to turn this into a discotheque. I think this building had another history to it, so that's not going to happen. And the person, Carlo, which I will just tell you, is now the head of the Casa Rosa Foundation, which is turning it into a cultural and arts. And it probably, if you go to that part of Italy, you probably can actually visit. I don't know if you can go inside yet. But anyway, sorry. This is compliments to my grandchildren. So he took us in to this building. He walked us through it. That's the outside of it, obviously. Kind of going in. There's a lot of the outside. I guess I'm going to say this because Carlo told me, I have not been able to verify this in my research, that the Nazis were in this part of Italy before the war, before the Axis alliance, like late 1936, and they saw this building and they thought it was a great model for, quite frankly, Auschwitz. And if you've seen pictures of Auschwitz, they thought this was a good idea, this kind of a stark monolithic building that nothing around it, although Auschwitz isn't a town, obviously. That's me on the outside of the building. I don't normally have that look on my face. You know, it was pretty heavy for me to be there. That's a distant shot of it. Again, distant shots of it. This was the car that the Comandante, who worked at the Red House, would drive back and forth with. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that piece of it. It's more of his car. Those are some artifacts, just things, things. Just a stairwell. It's a very barren, very desolate place. Those were postcards. I don't really know about the mail. I was not able to find out more about it, whether people were able to send or receive mail, but obviously there's some postcards. This is actually one of my favorite slides. It's one of the things that made me commit to writing this book. It is a lending library list. And it was the Jewish people who were detained there would share their books. So it was a check out and check in, and they had that, and I found that incredibly, it made everything very personal to me. It was somehow more personal than a lot of other things that I saw in this one day that I was able to go inside. Now, there was some crazy Hungarian artist. I think he was Hungarian, maybe wrong. The Comandante wanted a chapel in this building, and he asked this gentleman, he was a visual artist, he asked him if he would paint a chapel. So it was pretty much all Jews there. But anyway, I believe this man was a Jewish man. I'm pretty sure he was a Jewish man. And so he spent his old detention painting this chapel. Now, an interesting thing about it, I don't know if you can see that, but it looks like mosaic. It looks like you would see mosaic. It's not mosaic. The artist wanted it to be mosaic, so he painted it as a fresco, and then he carved squares. So when you're up against it, it presents as a mosaic, but it is not a mosaic. It gives you a sense also of how long people were there, right? There's the mosaic, you can see that, so it's pretty extraordinary. That's just me and my husband in this chapel together there. And those are the slides. That's what I have to say about the slides. Now, this person, Carlo, he told me lots of things about the Red House, but he told me 3 things in particular. I made tons of notes in the hours that we were there. We weren't there maybe a couple hours, but I made a lot of notes. But the 3 things, I made a lot of notes, and then I apparently immediately lost the little notebook that I'd written everything down in, and I can't remember at what point in the trip I realized I no longer had my notes. And my husband said to me, "What do you remember?" I said, "I remember," and I can still see the moment when Carlo was telling me the people were cold. If you saw those windows, that's the way they were. There are no windows, they're just bars. They were hungry, they had no food. They weren't really given any food. And if you had a profession, you worked in the town. Now, for those of you who have read The Red House, those details are all an important part of the story. And the plaque, which again, I've sort of pieced this together in my mind. So the Jews who came down, there's a little cultural history moment. So the racist, if you were what was called a foreign Jew, all right, and that means you were someone who had come to Italy before, if you became a citizen of Italy after January 1st, 1919, you were considered a foreign Jew. If you became a citizen on December 31st, 1918, you could keep your citizenship. So the people who went down there, who were sent there in exile and deportation, I mean, they weren't deported, let's not go to deportation, that's a different situation. Their citizenships were revoked, their passports were stamped alien, they were considered foreign, even if you'd lived 20 years, okay? 20 years in one day, you were good, 20 years, you were gone. You were taken and sent into these detention centers. There are a number of them in the South. And then this was the one that I came upon that actually, when I came upon it, almost no one had ever heard of it or knew about it. So you were sent there, and then there was obviously a fear of deportation as things went on. Now, the Jews were no longer in the Red House after the Allied forces came into southern Italy, and that was in September of 1943, right? But a lot of them chose to stay in the South, and the ones who chose to stay did okay. 9 Jews were deported to the north from the Red House. I don't know their circumstances. I wasn't able to find out anything more about them, except that they out of all of the several hundred, those were the only deportations. Now, the Jews who had professions, so if you were a doctor, a dentist, a lawyer, a nurse, you were enabled to work in the town. And the comandante would drive people, and I don't know how other people got back and forth, but you would be driven into town and you would work. Now, as I understand it, the people of Altobello thought they didn't know from Jews, right? There weren't that many living there, and certainly not a lot of them, and they weren't their doctors or their nurses or, and they thought they were going to be weird, right? All those stereotypes that I don't need to repeat for you. And instead they found regular people with families, people who'd left things behind, people who were hungry and cold. And they gave them blankets. They provided food. They did what they could. Obviously to such an extent that they were honored in that way by the people of Jerusalem. Okay. So that was the whole context. And once Larry said to me, what do you remember from the notebook? And I remembered those 3 things. Someone asked me about the research I did. And it's not that I didn't do research. I did do research. But those 3 things became the cornerstone for this novel. They became what I needed to know. And even though I tried to go into Italian archives, I do read Italian. I mean, good luck if any of you would like to, fact check my Italian, whatever. Okay, I'm going to cough. And I'm also going to take off my hat. It's cold, and now I'm warm. And I'm stuck to the microphone. Okay, I'm doing a little microphone dance. Yeah, no, I think I'm right. Excuse me, this feels a little personal, but yeah, Denise, I think I need someone to get my jacket. Thank you. How is that, folks? For a little comic, thank you. All right. I just don't want to cough while I'm talking to you if I can help it. And I don't remember what I'm talking about. Anybody? Where were we? The 3 important things. So the food, the cold, and the working in town. And that was really what made the people come to appreciate the Jews, first of all, and also to help them, really, to help them. So the other thing I want to talk to you about the building, and then I'm going to talk a bit about the book, was as we were leaving, I said to Carlo, what's with the graffiti that, no sarò qui per sempre, I will not be here forever. He said, oh, it's not graffiti. I said, well, what is it? So he said, it is written in live snails that are dormant. Now, snails can sleep for 3 years. And it was an art installation that an artist took dormant snails, put them on a piece of paper mache, because the snails would sleep for 3 years. They would wake up and eat the paste, because it was some nourishment, and they would leave. And I thought that was the most beautiful metaphor. It just, I don't know, I've never been able to. Anyway, so after my visit to the Red House and after Carlo and after all that, I realized that I could not, I felt that I would never leave the Red House unless I wrote about it. Okay. So that was kind of the beginning of my writing journey with this book, and it was just how I sort of started the process. I'm going to talk a little bit about the book. I'm going to talk a little bit about what I know about Italy and the Holocaust. I'm going to share a little bit of my process, and then I'd love to have questions from you guys. So the story of the Red House, okay. Again, I'm going to speak to you like a novelist, which is what I am. So just because I had the historical information, I did not have a story, right? So a writer, no matter how interesting something is and how you need a story. And I thought, well, I got home with this in my head, and I thought, I don't know what to do with this information. So I always answer a story with a story, so you're going to get another little story. In 2006, I was in the Memphis airport on a book tour, and something fell behind me. Now, mind you, I started writing this book in about 2021, so I'm going way back, right? 2006, I'm on tour for another book. I don't think I came here, Linda, for that book. And I heard something fall behind me. And I turned around, and a gentleman behind me had dropped something on the ground. And I looked, and it was a button, like a political button. It's a big round button. So I picked it up, and I was about to hand it to him, and I looked at the button. And before I could do anything, he said, no, you can keep that. I give that to people. And it was a picture of a woman's face, and written on the button was, have you seen this woman? And her name was Viola, which for those of you who've read The Red House, you will know that that is the name of the mother in the novel. So I got home, I had the history in my head, I had this burning thought about writing about this Red House, but I didn't have a story. I get a little choked up saying this part of it, and then I was sitting at my desk one day, and I turned around and I saw, I have a bulletin board, and I keep everything on it. I'm like a crow. I just keep all these little, or a mouse, I don't know, I keep all these little things. And I had the button, I kept it, and I saw Viola's face looking at me, and I thought, there's going to be a missing woman, there's a missing woman in this novel, and her name will be Viola. And that's all I needed to start, that was my starting place. Now, The Red House is the story of a woman named Laura. Her profession is she's a apartment stager. So if you need to buy a house or something, she takes, as she calls it, sort of sad, lonely houses and makes them look like happy people live there. So she'll put, pictures of family trips that never happened for people that didn't exist. That's that's in my, I liked writing that part of the book, actually. When Laura was 12 years old, her mother disappeared, Viola, and never found. And Laura has lived with this loss for 30 years. She has had a, shall we say, chaotic life. She's in a somewhat uncertain marriage. And the book opens with this. She's received a phone call from a man named Charlie Hendricks, who is a detective who has stayed on her mother's case for 30 years. He has followed this case. And he calls and he leaves a message. And Laura, rather than answering or calling him back, she has her reasons for not wanting to. You're going to have to read the book. She decides to flee to Italy, to Brindisi, where Laura was born. And Laura spent the first 6 years of her life with her mother and her father, and ultimately her sister, before coming to New Jersey, where she grew up. And Laura's thing is that she's looking for her mother's story, or at least something to try to, she doesn't want to hear what the detective has to say. She wants to find for herself what she can. And the only clue Laura has is her mother was an amateur painter, and she painted a red house. And on the back, the mother always wrote in Italian, "I will not be here forever." And so, again, I took these pieces and I tried to pull them together. I think it's because I'm left-handed. I'm not linear at all, which is why I'm paying for my sins right now with my left hand. I write by hand. Okay. This is actually a really good brace if anyone needs a hand brace. Anyway, so Laura goes to this town, to the city of Brindisi, in search of her mother. And she, again, this is the very beginning of the book. She finds the building where she thinks she was a child. She manages to talk to the concierge. The woman's not helpful. Laura goes back again, and the woman says, "Go to Ottobello Bello," although it's not called Ottobello Bello in the book. I forget what it's called. But whatever it's called, that's where Laura begins. She considers herself to be on an emotional scavenger hunt. And it takes her to places she did not imagine. So, one other thing I'll say about Laura is that part of her realization, again, this is like on the first 3 pages, is that she is the same age as her mother was when her mother disappeared. And so Laura has this fear or feeling that perhaps she is also disappearing in some way. So anyway, I wrote the book. That's kind of the story. It moves back and forth in time. I don't want to give away too much. I don't want any spoilers. Those of you who've read the book, please, if you ask a question, don't say, "Oh, blah, 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 the ending." No, we're not going there. You're going to have to read it. I will say one thing, that as, and this is something I love about being a novelist, and this was true also with Gateway to the Moon. There's a character in Gateway to the Moon named Elena. And I was writing that novel. My editor kept calling me up and saying, "Look, Mary, I love the book, but get rid of Elena. She doesn't belong in the book." And I kept saying, "No, she really belongs in the book." And Nan would say to me, "Why does she belong in the book?" Well, I couldn't answer the question because I didn't know the answer. I hadn't gotten there until I wrote a certain chapter. And as I was writing it, I realized why Elena was in the book. I didn't know it until I wrote it. And that has been the same process for me with this novel. I did not know it until I was writing it, and therefore I do not want you to know it until you read it. I got out of that pretty well, right? Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about this question of Italian fascism, and were the Italians anti-Semitic? Did they really want to deport the Jews? Like, there are lots of stories about what's called the good Italians. I did talk to a number of Italian historians in New York, and they had very differing views. Some were like, yes, the Italians didn't really want to deport the Jews, and they were very late to that game, shall we say? Game is not the right word. I apologize for that. Late to getting involved with deportations, and well, not until Mussolini and the Hitler Pact and all that. But anyway. And then there are others who say, no, they were fascists. And the Italians were just as fascistic as, the other Axis powers. There's a very good book. It's called, I think, Benevolence and Betrayal, by a Columbia University professor who comes from a family from Torino. And he's written a very good book about the Italian Jews of Torino. It's 4 families. And in one case, there were Italian fascists, Jewish fascists, who were 100% pro-Mussolini until they realized that it actually was not a good situation for them. But there were some Italian Jews who were fascists literally until they were being taken out and shot. Okay, and if you read his book, I really recommend it. I think his name is Alexander Stiller, or Stille. It's a very, very interesting book if you're interested in the history of Jews of northern Italy. But, I think I stand on because I have a lot of friends in Italy. We're very close to this family in Italy. And I know that there are Italian fascists who are anti-Semitic, just like there are anti-Semitic people all over the world. I have not personally met anyone. Now, I am a Jewish woman named Mary, and I will tell you, I have had a lot of things said to me. I'll give you one example. When our daughter was going to go to Kutcher's Camp in the Catskills, which is a sports camp, I'm just going to check our time. I think I'm okay. Am I okay? Right. Someone tell me when I'm not okay. I mean, I may not be okay, but just let me know. Our daughter was going to go to Kutcher's Camp, and I knew that our neighbors across the way had sent their daughter to Kutcher's. So, I called them, and they said, oh, yeah, we've got information, come on over. I said, great, I will, and I went over there, and they gave me some brochures, the husband did, and I said, oh, thanks, I hope that Eva liked the camp. And he said, yeah, it's a great camp, but, you should probably know there's a lot of Jews there. And I said, well, Kate was bat mitzvahed last year, so I think we're good. We're good. And he hasn't really spoken to me. But I've had things like that, moments like that in my own life. So I'm very attuned, I think. I have a pretty good feeling. And certainly the family that we have gone back to for 13 years, they, we can go out to dinner with 25 people, and they will make sure that there's no pork, or there's something for Mary that doesn't include pork. So it's like they're just so, but without making a thing about it, there's no question in their minds that we're just regular people. And so I guess that's more how I feel about Italians in this world. Obviously, we're living in a very strange world right now. It's a complicated world, in terms of the whole question of anti-Semitism. But I think, overall, and let me go back a minute to the Jewish fascists of Italy, because they were kind of gung-ho Mussolini, a lot of them. Look, they'd done well, especially the Jews in the north. They had, there are a lot of, Olivetti family, I believe, they were not fascists, but the Olivettis, the typewriter company, they're a Jewish family. So there's a lot of, very, entrenched, the Jews were actually in Italy before the Italians were actually in Italy. I mean, the things that Italians think of as Italian food really has deep Jewish heritage, that Jews have been in that part of the world since the destruction of the Second Temple. So I actually don't remember what I'm talking about. Can you help me out? Right. So the Italian fascist thing, that again. Okay. So, I do want to talk about the racial laws that Mussolini, Mussolini had a Jewish mistress for 20 years. I don't know if you know that or not. And he was very in love with her. And the minute he made his pact with Hitler, he dropped her. He dumped her. She's actually is a very respected journalist. She was a very respected journalist. She comes from a very respected Italian family. So, he dropped her. But, the first laws were rather general. I'm a little jet lagged. I'm a little tired, and I probably can't remember exactly what they were. But, the first ones were kind of like, well, Jews shouldn't, Italians shouldn't do so much commerce with Jews or something like that, right? And then it got like, Jewish children couldn't go to schools anymore, where they had to go to Jewish schools, and professors couldn't teach, and doctors couldn't minister. Like, people who had, Jewish doctors and dentists and tailors, they were told that, you had to be you could only minister, the Jewish doctors could only take care of Jewish patients. Now, there were Italians who said, like, you know, hell with this, I'm going to keep seeing my doctor and my dentist. But, you know, it could be a problem for people. You know, Jews had to give up their radios. And if you give up your radio, it came back to you with only the one station, the fascist station. You know, so, and there were, you know, stories I read about, you know, people who loved to listen to the opera and music on the radio, and your radio would come back and all you would hear was like, you know, propaganda. So, you know, it was like a slow tightening noose around them, and the laws got more and more complicated, and there were then exemptions, and you could technically bribe your way out, but there were actually very few people who got these exemptions. And then there were Jews who had served in the military. They'd served in World War I. And they were like, well, surely I will get an exemption. And they didn't get exemptions. So, you know, this whole thing of like having your rights taken away, your citizenship taken away, your professions, you know, everything slowly taken from you. And that's why, you know, many immigrated or whatever were able to get out, and, you know, and then there were those who we know weren't. So that's what I've got about, yes, 5 minutes, okay. So if I may, I want to share with you a little bit about the project I was working on. It's a little bit of my process, is that okay? 5 minutes, and then we have questions, we have time for questions? Okay, good, thank you for minding me, I appreciate, I need a minder. Okay, so when I went, so I like to talk about process. I've been a teacher for many years. And my feeling, I don't write in any order. I have absolutely no organization at all when I write. I write the scenes that pop into my head. I don't know where it's going to go. I don't know, you know. And my feeling has been for a long time, just because we read from, that's left, right? Left to right. Why do we write? Why should we write from, why should we be linear? So I think I write more like a painter. I rough it out, I sketch it, and then I work my way across. Anyway, so when we were going to Italy, I had 75 chapters of a book, 75, that were in no order at all. But I have this bizarre system that has worked for me with many books, and I used it for the Red House, which is if I have different historical periods, different timelines, and different characters, I printed on different colored paper, okay? So I might have blue paper for the present time. I might have one historical moment that is in purple paper. Well, that's too close to blue, so I don't like that. It'll probably be yellow. And then I'll, you know, I'll vary the colors as I go back, you know, in time. I will tell you one funny story, if I can remember my thread. I was speaking about this in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, and I told the story, and afterwards a rabbi came up to me and she said, we have boxes and boxes of colored paper, we don't know what to do with it, and they've shipped it to me. So I'm very happy to have any colored paper anyone wants to send to me. So anyway, when we got to Italy, I had these 75 pages of, these 75 chapters, hundreds of pages, in no order. And I woke up very early one morning, and, you know, poor Larry he was sleeping, as he does, very happily. And the place where we were staying had lots of keys, many keys, because it was this little Greek village, and, you know, and there were doors, and I would open them, and I'd find new rooms and things. So one morning I had a key, I took my coffee, I walked across the courtyard, I found the door, I walked in, and there was a game room with a ping pong table. And I was like, oh my God, there's a ping pong table, like it was awesome. So Larry comes down with his coffee, and he sees me taking the net off the ping pong table. And he said, it's a ping pong table, it's awesome, we need the net. I said, no, I'm so sorry, we're not gonna play ping pong, I need the table. So I took the table, and I took those 75 chapters, and I spread them all over the table. And this other thing I do that's very bizarre, and if you look at like the stained glass, I move colors around. I decide if there's too much yellow, I don't want too much blue, I move things around, and then I slowly start to number them as they come together in some bizarre system that makes no sense to anyone but me. And then when I finally was done after 2 weeks, I wrote the numbers on, I knew the order, I piled it up, and it became Gateway to the Moon. And it's exactly in the order that I put it together in that farmhouse, which was the same year that we came to the plaque in Ottavilla Bella. So I'm going to stop there, and hopefully we can have some time for questions, okay? Thank you. Thank you. What am I doing? Oh, I can't bend down because I'm tied up to this thing. Oh, wait, I can bend down. I'm no longer tied. Oh. Okay, good.
Oh, I'm sorry, okay.
There we go. Okay.
This is good, okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
for
Jan.
this, right?
Thank you.
I really appreciated this. You gave me a lot of hope for my children that they could make it if they do this kind of shifting of things around on a ping pong table. I mean,
Yeah,
really.
you need a ping pong table.
Okay. I
It doesn't
really
work
do-
in New York,
I
but-
really mean that.
Yeah, I understand. I do know what you mean. I do.
This was a great book. I read the book.
Thank you, Jan.
And I want to tell you, there's some stuff you left out
Oh, okay, well.
that you
I don't know.
really need to read. And it relates to what's going on in our country today, not only about fascism,
Well,
but Epstein.
okay,
And I won't say any more, but you
Okay. need
to read this
Thank
because
you.
it's very powerful.
thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now we're going to take questions. I'll be happy to bring it. Okay.
You were amazing.
Thank you.
But this isn't about the book. Would you now recommend going to that town that you didn't want to go to
I would
because
totally
it was so
recommend,
touristy?
well, I mean, it is, yes.
Okay.
If you, I do not know, I have not been back in a while. We're going to be back in the summer, so I don't know if you can get into the Red House or visit it. There is actually a hotel now, not right there, but there is a hotel. I mean, yes, I would recommend going to the town. The other thing that's interesting about the town, okay, when you go into the town, there are they're like these medieval symbols written on these weird houses, right? And one of the symbols, so there's a symbol that technically looks like is a swastika, but it obviously has no context for being a swastika. There are Greek letters and there's things like that. And there's a menorah. I mean, it's definitely a menorah. So I don't know if there's some Jewish history with the town or whatever. There is if you Google Jewish legacy tours of Puglia, or just Jews, Puglia tourism, there are a lot of Jewish sites that are, I mean, look, the Italians have figured, like, we travel, right? And we're good. So they, so you check it out on the Jewish Puglia heritage tours. Yep.
I also read the book. It's a wonderful book that
Thank you so
I'm
much.
recommending to everyone.
Thank you.
But I was curious about the Red House. What was its original function? Why was it that
Right.
huge building built in the first place?
I believe it began as an agricultural school way, way back when. I mean, the building is maybe 100 and, it's old, 150 something, it's old. It was an agricultural school, and then it was an orphanage. And then in 1940, when they began to deport I shouldn't say deport, exile, the foreign Jews who didn't consider themselves to be foreign, then it became a detention center. And then after the war, it became a prisoner of war, whatever you call that. It was also for a period, I believe, a place where Jews who were going to go to Palestine could have some safe haven. So I honestly, because it's in Italian archives, like, I got as far as I could reading it, but afterwards the history is, but it, and then it was abandoned for decades,
Hi. First, I just want to say I love Gateway to the Moon.
Thank you.
And I had not originally signed up to be here tonight, and then I realized, I gotta come.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm really looking forward to reading this. But
Okay.
this is just kind of a general question.
Yeah.
In terms of do you just happen on ideas for books, or do you actually come up with something and then start researching, or is it a little of both? Or, like, how did you get the idea of Gateway to the Moon?
Oh,
Or
okay.
some
So
of
how
your
did I get
other-
the idea
I haven't
of
read
Gateway
any
to the
others.
Moon? Okay. I mean, I'm a little bit like, is it Chicken Little that the sky has to fall on their head? Like something, hits me. And that's also true with research. Like when I'm researching something like for the Jazz Palace, I spent 17 years researching that book. Don't ask, I mean, it's crazy, but anyway, I did. And I read a lot of books about Al Capone. Like I read everything. I was also obsessed. I became obsessed with Al Capone.
So
It's
how did
set
you
in
get that
Chicago.
idea?
What?
Where did that idea come from?
My dad was an amateur jazz musician in Chicago in the jazz age. But in my research about Al Capone, there was like one paragraph in one of these 800-page biographies I read that said that he could dance. He was a good dancer, and I thought, he's got to dance. I'm going to make him dance in the novel. Now, and to answer your question about Gateway to the Moon, because I like this, I'm going to answer this quickly. Try. We rented a house in New Mexico when our daughter was little, and I just wanted to get out of New York. I wanted to work, and I thought for some reason that I would actually like living there, which I did not, for various reasons. But anyway, we were in a very isolated place, and our daughter was very little, and she was in daycare during the early part of the day, but we found a babysitter. I put up a sign, for those of you who've read the book. Rachel, the woman in the book, puts up a sign that says, babysitter wanted. And I put up a sign, and this kid answered the ad and came over. He was this big, tall, Hispanic young man, maybe 16 years old. And when my husband and I were home working in the afternoons, he would entertain our daughter, outside or whatever, And one day he came to me and he said, I have a question. You're Jewish, right? And I said, we are. And he said, do you eat pork? And I said, I don't. And he said, that's really interesting. He said, I don't eat pork either. And I said, okay, that's interesting. And he said, my family doesn't eat pork. I said, that's interesting. And he said, and my town doesn't eat pork. I said, your town, your whole town? He said, yeah, no one eats pork in my town. And we don't know why we don't eat pork, but we just don't. And then a little while later, he came to me with a similar question, do you like candles on Friday night? And I said, I don't, but my grandmother does. And again, it was like, my family does, I do, my family does, my town does. And he said, do you think I might be Jewish? And I remember the look on his face. And that's what set me on the journey to try to understand the history of the crypto Jews of New Mexico. So it's something like that I can't explain. I would answer the question vis-a-vis what I'm working on now. I don't know if I'm allowed to do that for 2 seconds before we get to the next question, Jan. Can I quickly answer, because it's but what I'm working on. Okay, I didn't want to write another Jewish book. I did it, and I didn't want to write another historical novel. But in 2019, just before COVID, my daughter, who'd been looking for a place outside of the city, she wanted to buy something. She called and she said, Mom, I think I found the perfect place on Craigslist. I'm like, great, you found a house in Craigslist. And she said, yeah, it's a cabin in the Catskills, it's really remote. And she said, will you and Dad drive up this weekend? And I said, sure. And I turned to Larry and I said, we're gonna go talk her out of this, right? Because it's obviously a bad idea. He said, absolutely. So we drove up in this very remote cabin, very isolated place. There's really almost nothing around it. But it was beautiful. It was truly beautiful. And we walked in, and the man who was selling it was this big burly man, and he had inherited from people that he had taken care of. They had no children. And we're walking through this house, and there's a tiny little dining room. And on the dining room table was a menorah and Haggadahs and all this Jewish silver and like artifacts, like Jewish artifacts. And I said to the man, I said, what are these? He said, oh yeah, they were Holocaust survivors and they didn't have anyone to leave this to. So do you want any of this stuff? So anyway, our daughter bought the cabin and I got the Haggadah. And I've been obviously haunted by it, and it's from Vienna, 1927. So that's the next book. So again, something has to like hit me, yeah. Anyway. Yeah. Okay, and I'll be shorter, I promise. Sorry.
I hope I can be too. Thank you very much. I
Thank you.
enjoyed the book,
Thank you.
and I very much enjoyed your presentation.
Thank you.
My name is Alfredo Sadoun. I mentioned that because my first name is, of course, Italian. My last name is Sephardic Jewish. And I grew up with the story from both my parents all the time about surviving the Holocaust in Italy, which meant that as I was reading the book, every other page was seen through the lens of one or the other of my parents, as it was very much their experiences or related
Thank
to some
you.
story I'd heard. I probably would differ with you only on the controversy. They gave me a clear feeling that most of the Italians, once they got to know a Jew, saw them as a good human being and did what they could to help. Of course, there are exceptions. Of course,
Right.
there was cruelty. But it was nothing comparable to what happened in Ukraine or Poland or Germany.
No, absolutely not.
So
Absolutely not.
there
Yeah.
was some goodness in all this, and I think that one of the nice things about your book is it reflected that as well.
That was the book I wanted to write. I'm basically an optimistic person, although I have dark moments right now. But anyway, but yes, I
I had
want,
a question.
yes.
The question is, in terms of Viola, why was she broken? Was it because she lost her parents?
So I don't want to talk about that now. Can we
Oh,
talk about that
fair
privately?
enough.
Do you mind that? Okay,
Not at all.
thank you.
Fair enough.
Okay, I'll talk to you privately about that, though.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hi,
Hi.
and welcome.
Thank
And
you.
It's so lovely to have you here. And I have to say, I'm a newbie to your books, and I'm going to get them. And it just is the way you're describing yourself. I felt like that's it. Because I'm not a writer, but it explains a lot, and I think it's just a genuine something that happens. It's like it's there, and you can't explain it. But I think it's a wonderful process. And I think it's enthralling, and I'm just so happy to hear about it.
Thank you.
It just meant a lot to me. Maybe it doesn't make sense, but really.
No, I mean, I like to share that because I think there are a lot of people who think like, oh, if I'm going to paint, I have to draw, or if I'm going to blah, I have to do blah, or I can't cook without a recipe. And my feeling is like, get the ingredients and see what you come up with. And hopefully it'll be all right.
No, but you certainly have the talent for it, and I think I'm thrilled because I'm definitely going to get the book and
Thank
start
you.
reading it.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
No, I'm
Thank you all.
So I just have a couple of announcements. We have several more events that are coming up. This coming Sunday, November the 23rd at 4 p.m. at Temple Sinai in Glendale, Arthur Dan Slater will be discussing his work, The Incorruptibles, a nonfiction book about criminal activities by some Jewish immigrants struggling to survive in New York City during the 20th century, and another group of Jewish men who worked to close down these activities out of commitment to upholding the values of the Jewish community. So sounded very interesting. And just a moment here. And for those of you who are poetry lovers, on Wednesday, December the 3rd at 7 p.m. on Zoom, poet Owen Lewis will be reading some of his poetry, many of them written just after October the 7th. And he has received many prizes. He is also a professor of psychiatry, which I thought is just really fascinating to moonlight as a poet when you're a psychiatrist. So I know you're looking forward to buying your own copy of the book and having it signed, and that's going to be next door in the social hall. And our pop-up book shop is underwritten by the family of Myra Weiss, who was a founder of this festival 27 years ago. And I believe that all of the women who did all the wonderful cooking have been thanked, but I have their names, so I'll say them all again. Robin Evans, Arlene Bailey, Susan Ivory, and Carol Osier. I hope I didn't leave anybody out. Okay, so now we have a raffle, and Mary, you may pick the ticket. Okay. Oh, okay. Okay. Oh, okay. So the ticket is 298019. Oh, okay, good. Okay, great. Thank you so much, and enjoy the reception and book signing. There you go. I don't know what's in there.